recording. Hello, friends.
The recording again. Go ahead.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 31st webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Morning Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress, as shown here. Previous episodes of this and the Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Teachings or Secret Doctrine. During our last webinar, we took a look at the mystery schools of both Attis and Samatharis, the Kiberic mysteries. Today, we'll continue our study of the earliest and possibly the most esoteric of all the Greek mysteries, which took root on the island of Samatharis. So, with no further ado, let's get started with the reading.
Okay. The mysteries of Kabiri were divided into 3 degrees, the first of which celebrated the death of Kashmala at the hands of his 3 brothers. The second, the discovery of his mutilated body, the parts of which had been found and gathered after much labor. And the third, accompanied by great rejoicing and happiness, his resurrection and the consequent salvation of the world. The temple of the Kabiri at Samatharis contains a number of curious divinities, many of them misshapen creatures representing the elemental powers of nature, possibly the Bacchic Titans. Children were initiated into the Kiberian Cult with the same dignity as adults, and criminals who reached the sanctuary were safe from pursuit. Their Samathrasian rites were particularly concerned with the navigation, the Dioscuri, Castor, and Pollux, or the gods of navigation, being among those propitiated by the members of the cult. The Argonautic expedition, listening to the advice of Orpheus, stopped at the island of Samatharis for the purpose of having its members initiated into the Kabiric rites. Sorry, Anne Veronica, for murdering some of those words.
Thank you, Bill. Any thoughts or questions right off the top? I know sometimes it takes a bit to connect with this material, and we were right in midstream on this, on these Kiberic mysteries when we stopped last time. So first thing, we have to keep in mind that there is no written record of these, and never was, of these mysteries. So let's start by taking a closer look at how these 3 degrees of the Kiberic mysteries may have unfolded. First, Albert Pike gives us an insight into the first degree, which centered around the death of Kashmala. So let's, if we could get a reader for this, please.
Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
The candidate was crowned with an olive branch and girded with a purple ribbon or apron. He was placed upon a throne around which the priests and initiated performed sacred dances. The initiate was afterwards made to represent Cadmelus, and the murder was reenacted. The rite was very popular in Greece, and is said that Orpheus, Cadmus, Hercules, and Ulysses were initiated into it. In the ceremonies was represented the death of the youngest of the Kabiri, slain by his brothers, who fled into Etruria, carrying with them the chest or ark that contained his genitals, and there the phallus and the sacred ark were adorned. Herodotus says that the Samathrasian initiates understood the object and origin of this reverence paid the phallus, and why it was exhibited in the mysteries. Clemens of Alexandria says that the Kabiri taught the Tuscans to revere it. It was consecrated at Holopius in Syria, where the mysteries of a divinity having many points of resemblance with Atis and Sibyl were represented. The Pulaski connected it with Mercury, and it appears on the monuments of Mithras, always everywhere, a symbol of the life-giving power of the sun at the vernal equinox.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, of note here is the reverence paid the phallus was a symbol of the life-giving power of the sun at the vernal equinox, right? You always find this in phallic worship. It's true in India, where you have the lingam, which is at the center of every temple, and it's the procreative power of deity itself, and thus in a sense represents all existence, right? The third logos for theosophists, right? Any thoughts about this? Questions? The second degree was made up of, quote, the discovery of Cadmilus's mutilated body, the parts of which had been found and gathered after much labor. Okay, this seems to have been directly inspired by the Assyrian mysteries, wherein Isis is tasked with finding and reassembling the body of the slain Osiris, with a special emphasis in both cases on the phallus. For as creator gods, it is the solar procreative power that welds spirit and form together. Hence the necessity of finding, as a metaphor, the phallus. Finding and reassembling the mutilated body parts of Cadmilus might also have reference to the Greek Uranus, as described in Morals and Dogma. I just want to do, before we go forward here, I just want to remind you that Kashmala, or Cadmila, is the fourth, or really the first of four brothers. And the other three represent, it's the soul aspect from one point of view, right? And the other three aspects are earthly aspects, the threefold human being, mental, astral, and physical, right? Representing that. Whereas Kashmala represents the soul. So the death of Kashmala by the three brothers represents basically just the process of coming into incarnation, right? Because Kashmala is removed from immediate experience, right? Of course, there's no actual death of soul. It's only the experience of incarnation that makes that seem true. Anyway, moving right along.
Francis,
yeah.
I just wanted to point out that what you just said gets back to the second part of that in the right-hand column, with the navigation, the Dioscuri, and Castor and Pollux being the gods of navigation, because that's exactly what they represent, the mortal sun and the immortal sun.
Exactly. Well said, Biel. Exactly. We're going to actually get into the Argonauts and how metaphorical that is, in this particular sense, that you have the heavenly brother, which would be Kashmala or Cadmilas, and then you have, the other three represented by Castor, right, which represent the earthly side. And it's some really interesting material about the hull and the mast being the two brothers, and we'll get there in a bit. Okay, so the second degree was made up of, quote, the discovery of Cadmilus's mutilated body, the parts of which have been found and gathered after much labor. This seems to have been directly inspired by the Assyrian mysteries, as I just mentioned, because it is solar procreative power. So let's go on to the quote about the Greek Uranus, and you'll see, you know, a reflection of what we've just been discussing in this. Can we get a reader for this?
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Brahma, the creating agent, sacrificed himself when, by descending into material forms, he became incorporated with his work, and his mythological history was interwoven with that of the universe. Thus, although spiritually allied to the Supreme, the Lord of all creatures, Prajapati, he shared the imperfection and corruption of an inferior nature, and steeped in manifold and perishable forms, might be said, like the Greek Uranus, to be mutilated and fallen. He thus combined two characters, formless form, immortal and mortal, being and non-being, motion and rest.
Thank you. So the Greeks were masters at veiling the wisdom teachings in metaphor. And this allowed everybody to partake of the mythology, but then the true meaning of the mythology was reserved for those, you know, basically who had the ears to hear, you know, who entered the mystery schools, and it was gradually revealed at higher and higher levels, right? Okay. Any thoughts about this?
Yes, hold on one second here. Lynn says it's interesting that both Saturn and Uranus have rings.
Yeah. And the rings have been esoterically always that representative of the ring past knot, and of cycles of time, especially with Saturn, who's the ruler of time, right? In fact, in the old Greek way, you progress up through the planets as like they were gates, and then you finally pass through the seventh gate, which was the Saturnian gate, and that took you beyond the realm of space and time. And this basic mythology pervaded, you know, all the myths of the ancient world. Okay, McCoy's General History of Freemasonry confirms the Assyrian origins of the Greek mysteries. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Oops, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, I got it. The ceremony consisted of funereal rites expressive of the wildest grief on account of his death, a search for his body, which is at last found, the return of Osiris to life, and the destruction of Typhon, his assassin. Osiris was the symbol of truth or goodness, Typhon of error or evil. The murder of Osiris signified the temporary subjugation of virtue, and his resurrection the ultimate triumph of the good. This was the parent of all those Grecian rites which represent a death and a resurrection, and whose principal features are perpetuated in the legend of the Sidonian builders.
Thank you, Carrie. Any thoughts about this? Oh, by the way, Sidonian refers to a city in Lebanon called Sidon or Sidon.
Okay, we do have a couple of comments. Greg says Uranus cycle is 84 years or 12 cycles of 7. And then he adds that Jupiter's cycle is every 12 years. So.
Yeah, these numbers that recur and recur again, you know, in mythology, and they're borne out in astronomical fact. And that's no coincidence.
And then Ephrosyne says, Cadmilus was the lover and beloved of the Great Mother, like Attis. He is the child and at the same time the lover of the Great Mother. It symbolizes Mercury elsewhere. Maybe it is a symbol of the Christ or the solar angel born of the Virgin Matter and sacrifices in order to promote evolution.
Oh, that's a terrific comment. Wow. Yes, the lover of the mother. You know, this is another theme, that takes place. When you are in touch with the source of your being, you become its lover, right? That's just by the fact of being in touch. And therefore, you become an exemplar. The greatest exemplars are the avatars, of our race. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, next up, the third degree was, quote, accompanied by great rejoicing and happiness, his resurrection and the consequent salvation of the world. Okay, this final degree, found in the advanced program of every mystery school we've studied, was the most universal stage and was invariably followed by a public festival of resurrection. But since the third degree of the Kabiric mysteries, the ones on Samatharis that we're studying now, was almost certainly initiatory, we can only guess at how it may have unfolded. Nonetheless, we might speculate that since it took place at the vernal equinox, its rituals must have celebrated the union of the sun and new moon, symbolic of soul and the new soul-infused personality. An event observed in Egypt, Assyria, and eventually by every mystery school, including Christianity. Any thoughts about this? You even see it in the Van Gogh painting, where the union of the starry night, or the union of the moon and sun. Okay, next up, the temple of the Kabiri at Samatharis contained a number of curious divinities, many of them misshapen creatures representing the elemental powers of nature, possibly the Bacchic Titans. Well, this sent me on a wild goose chase. I probably spent 2 hours trying to find these curious divinities, right? Misshapen creatures. And this is the only image I could find that might fit the description of curious divinities or misshapen creatures from Samatharis. It looks to me like two griffins feeding on a person. Can you see that? Possibly Cadmilus, who is reaching upwards. And maybe this is the Kabiric version of the Egyptian crocodile who feeds on the heart, representing the form nature of the deceased, or the sacrifice of the form in order to ascend to spirit. It's impossible to say. Like I say, there's no written record. Of course, we have one of our greatest of all works of art is from Samatharis, even though there's very little that survived. That frontispiece that I showed. See here, let me come out. So we're on 21. So the very first thing I showed you, right, this is Samatharisian. And, if there was this level of artistic excellence, that suggests a very advanced school. But we just don't have context, for this. Anyway. Okay. Next, children were initiated into the Kiberian cult with the same dignity as adults, and criminals who reached the sanctuary were safe from pursuit. Children were also admitted into the lesser Eleusinian mysteries. In fact, that's one of the amazing things about the Greek mysteries as a whole, is that the teachings extended all the way down into children, much like our Sunday school idea, right? They didn't take these sophisticated higher degrees, but they were prepared from a very early age. In the Samatharisian mysteries, the mysteries that involved the children took place on Limnos and lasted 9 days. They were the lesser mysteries for everyone on an adjoining island, nearby island called Limnos. As to the protection of criminals, that wasn't unique to Samatharis. In fact, there were many asylia in ancient Greece, including the temple of Theseus, shown here, and the altar of pity on the Agora, both in Athens. Of course, the problem was you had to stay in the temple. You know, if you were a criminal, you could, as soon as you left, you could be taken. Whereas on Samatharis, the entire island was a temple. Next up, the Samatharisian rites were particularly concerned with navigation. The Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, or the gods of navigation, being among those propitiated by members of that cult. So here you have something very different from the three brothers, the three earthly brothers, and Cadmilas. And this consideration of Castor and Pollux runs quite deep and gives us real insight into Samatharis. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, I'm sure. Can you read that for us, please?
Okay. The Dioscuri were originally Phoenician divinities, the patrons of art and commerce. In Songkoniathon, they are thus described. To Zadok were born Dioscuri or Kabiri or Corybantes or Samatharisians. They first invented the mystic ship. This means evidently, even if it means no more, that the several rites observed in Phrygia and Asia, purporting to be originally from Samothrace, were substantially identical.
Okay, this is a somewhat technical reference, but it gives us some cross-referencing here that's useful. And then this reading, please, from Isis Unveiled.
Okay, Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. There were still others who maintained, being as right in their way, that there were only two Kabiri at Samothrace. These were esoterically the two Dioscuri, Castor and Pollux, exoterically Jupiter and Bacchus. The two personified the terrestrial poles, geodesically the terrestrial and the pole of the heavens, astronomically, as also the physical and spiritual man. Secret doctrine. Thus, modern philosophers may be said not to have gone one step beyond what the priests of Samothrace, the Hindus, and even the Christian Gnostics well knew. The former have shown it in that wonderfully ingenious mythos of the Dioscuri, or the sons of heaven, the twin brothers spoken of by Schweiger, who constantly die and return to life together, while it is absolutely necessary one should die that the other may live. They knew as well as our physicists that when a force has disappeared, it has simply been converted into another force. Though archaeology may not have discovered any ancient apparatus for such special conversions, it may nevertheless be affirmed with perfect reason and upon analogical deductions that nearly all the ancient religions were based on such indestructibility of matter and force, plus the emanation of the whole from an ethereal spiritual fire, or the central sun, which is God or spirit, on the knowledge of whose potentiality is based ancient theurgic magic. Isis Unveiled.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, so the key phrase here is when a force has disappeared, it has simply been converted into another force. This is, soul force being converted into physical incarnation, right? Pollux being temporarily converted, though it's an illusion of appearance, into Castor, right? So that's what this entire section is about. The indestructibility of matter has to do with the noumenal matter, which comes from an ethereal or spiritual fire. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Yes, hold on a second. From Efrosini, the Dioscuri are an example of brotherly love. Once immortal renounced immortality and paradise in order for his mortal brother to dwell in it day after day. This brotherly love is contrasted to the example of brothers who kill, the third brother, or by Cain who kills Abel. It perhaps symbolizes the evolution of human relationships from the murder of the brother to the self-sacrifice for the brother.
Yeah, that's great stuff. It really suggests a higher understanding, because the same thing goes on. Cadmilus is obfuscated by the three brothers that quote unquote kill him. That is, they move into incarnation, right? The three principles of mental, astral, and physical human being, right? Whereas here, it's a recognized duality, right? It's, in other words, it's the myth concerning Castor and Pollux has more to do with a recognition of soul infusion. Even incarnation, Pollux is the dominant player, even though the appearance is of Castor, right? I love this here, this perfect balance in the two urns that, representing the physical realities. It's quite interesting. So yeah, thanks for that. Keep them coming. Those are great comments. Any other questions about this? Okay, well, we're going to get into it a little deeper here. The Argonauts, the Argonautic expedition, listening to the advice of Orpheus, stopped at the island of Samatharis for the purpose of having its members initiated into the Kabiric rites. Okay, the Argonauts and the Argo veil a profound concept worthy of deeper consideration. In fact, a concept that BL and I touched on when we were discussing the idea of the Castor and Pollux representing the two poles of the heavenly and earthly human being. So let's take a look at this extended excerpt from Anacalypsis. Can we get a couple of readers, please? Start with a reader, please, for this.
Okay, let's start with Joan, please.
It now becomes necessary to make a few observations on the Indian linga and yoni, as connected with the celebrated boat of the Hindus called Arga, which I propose to show gave rise among the Greeks to the fables of the Argonauts, etc. In the old philosophy of the Hindus, I have shown that the world was supposed to be destroyed and renewed at the end of certain periods, and this process was supposed to be of immense duration. During this period, Brahma, the creator, was believed to be in a state of repose in the profundity of the great abyss or firmament, and the male and female generative powers of nature, in conjunction, were said to float or brood on the surface of the firmament or abyss, and in themselves to preserve the germ of animated nature of all beings. This operation of the two powers is described by the linga in the shape of a mass, fixed in the yoni in the shape of a boat floating in the firmament. After a time, the female generative power begins to act by feeling the passion of love, which is described by the sending forth of a dove. And this is the beginning of a new age. Of this, Colonel Wilford says, Satyavatra, having built the ark and the flood increasing, it was made fast to the peak of Nabanda with a long cable. The mystic ocean in which the ship Arga floated is the ethereal space or fluid called firmament in Genesis 1:7, in which the bodies of the planetary system revolve.
Thank you. Okay, and next.
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
The Ark or Arga, the ship, with its Mount Meru in the center by way of mast, may be seen in every temple of India and requires no explanation. It is the Omphale of Delphi. The earth was often called the Arga. The North Pole was the Linga, surrounded by 7 zones, rising one above another, and 7 seas or rivers or waters, and an outward one called Oceanus. It is this Oceanus the whole floated. Thus the earth became the Arga or Lona, and Meru the pole, the Linga. I think he must be very blind who does not see here the duplicate of the mosaic allegory of a ship and a deluge. The animated world in each case preserved in a boat or Arga or Theba, but in the latter, instead of putting all the live animals into one ship, the germ or principle of generation is substituted. The Arga is represented by a vessel of copper by the Brahmins in their sacred rites. It is intended to be a symbol or hieroglyph of the universal mother. It is very often in the form of an elliptic boat or canoe, having both ends similarly pointed or bifora, as its name was. In the center of it is an oval rising embossed, which represents the Linga. By this union of the Linga and Yoni, or Loni, it is intended mystically to repeat the 2 principles of generation, to represent them as one. This boat, as I have already intimated, was the Argo of Greece, the name of the mystic ship in which the Ionians who lived at Argos sailed to seek the golden fleece of the ram.
Okay, yes, these words, it looks like an L, but it's Ione, and over here, Iona. And that's the name of an island in Greece where dwelt the Ionians. Okay, and there's a lot to ponder on this passage, not least of which is the idea that the Greek Argo, with its phallic mast and yoni-shaped hull, represented the principle of generation, right? And was thus a more esoteric version of Noah's Ark, where the generation was indicated by, having a male, female of each animal. But here, the principles of generation are represented. But in both cases, bore the seeds of the 5th root race after the flood that submerged Atlantis. The 2 aspects of deity honored as Samatharis, the heavenly and earthly poles, represented by Pollux and Castor, could be seen as symbolized by the hull and mast of the Argo plying the heavens. Any thoughts or questions about anything having to do with the Argonauts, the Argo? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anne Veronica says Delphi was called or seen as the Omphale, the belly button of the world. Oh, it was called or seen as. the belly button of the world, the Omphale.
Yeah, there's there's a few extant sculptures, for lack of a better word. There's one out at Delphi of this fabulous. I'm tempted to go out and go to the internet and find it because you can find it so easily, but just type in Omphalos Delphi. You'll see this amazing cone shape with these lines of bees all over it. I saw it in person in the, in that museum there in Delphi. And the idea being that this is where creation issued forth. Esoterically, this is where this is that link between the unseen and the manifested worlds, putting Delphi in a sense as the center of the world, which, to the Hindus is Mount Meru. In every culture, you have in the US, you have, the Sioux believed it was Harney Peak, right, which later was renamed Black Elk Peak. And all over the world, you'll have this place from which manifestation issued forth, right?
Okay, and then we got a couple more comments. Lynn says spaceships bringing seeds, DNA to the planet from outside the solar system.
Yeah, that's, some believe that, some feel that those seeds are actually carried on the unseen planes, and that they're brought forth through the plan at certain points, and that no external agency like spaceships is necessary for this to function. But that certainly is a belief. And, as a result of recent news articles, where Navy pilots saw spaceships daily for a 2-year period and recorded them, there's little question that something's going on. But let's not devolve into a spaceship conversation, okay? Try to stay on point.
Okay. Efrosini says, Argo possessed the ability of prophetic speech because wood from the oak of Dodoni, the great oracle of Zeus, had been used in its construction. The word Argo in Greek means fast. Maybe he's talking about the initiation process.
Well, you have a mast and a hull. So you have the source, a means by which to contact the source as part of the metaphor, which is the ship, right? And so the mast is the linking mechanism. It is spirit. It's the Pollux principle, you could say, that connects Castor, who's in manifestation, that's represented by the waters of materialism, right? Connects that to its own source. And so, yes, it certainly would be a prophetic mechanism, right? It's really interesting. You have to love the metaphors used in Greek mythology. They're just fabulous. The more you hang out with them, the more insight you get into their higher and higher meanings, right? It helps to have a key, like theosophical teachings of Dwalgul, or other esoteric teachings, in order to recognize these Greek metaphors. But they're certainly there. Yeah, anyone else?
I just got some file from Anne Veronica. I'm not quite sure what it is. What is it, Anne Veronica? I'm downloading it.
Well, I found the image that Francis was describing in the internet, and I sent it. About the Omphalos of Delphi, that was like bees, as you said, and I have sent the image.
Yeah, terrific. So if you would, Biel, you could pop that in the chat box. Anybody interested can open it on their own computer.
Okay, I'll try. I'll work on finding it in the downloads, and there it is. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So this all segues into HPB's comments on the origin of the mysteries of Samatharis, as well as to the identity of Cadmilus, a theory held by both HPB and Faber, who wrote a dissertation on the Kabiri. And, you know, with this, you're going to cut through to the core of what, instead of looking at the archaeological record, you're looking at someone who was informed by masters of wisdom and just told her what this was about. So let's get a reader for this, please.
Okay, Greg, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah, sure. Okay. He, Adamas, was the archetype of the first males in the order of generation and was one of the 7 autochthonous ancestors or progenitors of mankind. If, while coupling with this the fact that Samothrace was colonized by the Phoenicians and before them by the mysterious Pelasgians who came from the east, one remembers also the identity of the mystery gods of the Phoenicians, Chaldeans, and Israelites. It will be easy to discover whence came also the confused account of the Noachian deluge. Moreover, neither the Chaldean nor the biblical deluge, the stories of Xisuthros and Noah, is based on the universal or even on the Atlantean deluges recorded in the Indian allegory of Vaivatswata Manu. They are the exoteric allegories based on the esoteric mysteries of Samothrace. If the older Chaldees knew the esoteric truth concealed in the Puranic legends, the other nations were aware only of the Samothracian mystery and allegorized it. They adapted it to their astronomical and anthropological, or rather phallic, notions. Samothrace is known historically to have been famous in antiquity for a deluge, which submerged the country and reached the top of the highest mountain, an event which happened before the age of the Argonauts.
Okay, and we'll keep on going. Reader, please.
Kirsten, can you read that for us, please?
The death of these kindred deities is the very same circumstance as the murder of one of the Corybantes or Kabiri by his 2 brothers. For Corybas, Cadmilus was no other than Bacchus, or the solar Noah. The death of Bacchus, Osiris, Adonis, and this imaginary murder of Corybas Cadmilus is noticed by most authors who treat of the Kabiric mysteries as merely the allegorical death of Noah or his entrance into the ark.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Do you get the meaning here? That what does it mean, Noah entering into the ark? I mean, if the ark, you know, think of what we've been talking about, the metaphor of the ark and the mast. So what happens when Noah enters into the ark? Any thoughts?
I think he passes into the inner planes in a sense.
Well, it's just reverse, actually. He enters into incarnation.
Oh, okay.
You see, because he's coming from the place of true being into this illusory world. So that's the allegorical death, right? Now, they see the thing that's so interesting is that they reverse the myth is reversed. Like, for instance, Cadmilus is killed by the 3 brothers, suggesting that, you know, 4 brothers hanging out on the physical plane, and one of them is killed by the other 3. But it's a blind and a metaphor for just the reverse, which is that Cadmilus is killed through the incarnation of the three aspects of human incarnation, right? Does that make sense? And, so you have that in a sense true of all these, that's the mystery behind the death of all these gods, Bacchus, Osiris, Adonis, right? That's the esoteric version of the death. Okay, let's see what's up next. Faber's theory that Cadmilus is the solar Noah links him with the Argo and the Dioscuri. Here you see the Egyptian version of a solar Noah. And possibly even to the four Kumaras. But given that there's no corroborative evidence about the Kabiric mysteries, we really don't know because they were able to keep their secrets intact. We can only, the best thing we have comes through HPB, frankly, because she had direct contact with the Masters of Wisdom who revealed some qualities of this. In particular, that they were I think we went over this last time, that they are in fact the four Kumaras, these four brothers. Now how that works out, you can't say for sure. But it was a very, very high form of mystery school. Okay, can we get next
Francis?
up? Yeah.
Please go back to that slide.
Yeah.
Okay, now first off, Anne Veronica says, so Cadmilus represents the soul. That was based on your previous statement. And then reference this, she says, what is in the middle of the boat?
Oh, the scarab, which represents basically, is that what you're talking about? This figure here, this beetle-like figure? Yeah, this is the aspirational soul that is imprisoned in the form aspect that is ever reaching upward. It's equivalent to what's called the jiva, or that internal principle that is ever upward reaching, right, towards the solar reality. So it starts in the boat of manifestation and reaches towards the solar reality. And it's upheld by the god, you could say, of all existence, who would be Osiris.
Sorry.
Well, actually, in this case, this is Nun, which is the embodiment of the primordial waters. That's the feminine principle of, it's basically the Great Mother, who lifts the bark of the sun god Ra into the sky at the moment of creation. That's the subtext here, but you got to remember that this didn't come from the Egyptians necessarily. It can be an interpretation, but yeah, this sounds right.
And then Greg says, could it also be related to the birth of Zoroaster or of the sun god of Egypt, Ra?
Yeah, it's a different form of the myth, couched in different mythological, in a different mythological story, but meaning ultimately the same thing, right? This is not particularly, this is Egyptian, not Zoroastrian, but yeah, it would have its parallel. Okay.
And then we have a comment from Ephraim. She says, in fact, the highest peak of Samatharis is Seos, the Seos mountain, meaning save or savior. That's because of his height. He saved people when the Dardanus cataclysm.
All right, and that would be, with all due respect, that would be the exoteric version, that it saved people because they could walk up the mountain and stand on the top during the flood. But it's the true savior of it. It's like the mast or like Mount Meru. It's the spiritual element. Mountains are, invariably used to describe the outer manifestation of the heavenly aspect, right? So it would be, and the center of the island, it was almost certainly worshipped in, that great temple, as and there were probably pilgrimages to the top where people were able to have visions of the higher realms, so that's the true savior aspect. Anyone else? Okay, next up. Can we get a reader?
Herodotus relates that when Cambyses entered the temple of the Kabiri, he was unable to restrain his mirth at seeing before him the figure of a man standing upright, and facing the man, the figure of a woman standing on her head. Had Cambyses been acquainted with the principle of divine astronomy, he would have realized that he was then in the presence of the key to universal equilibrium. I ask, says Voltaire, who were these hierophants, these sacred Freemasons who celebrated their ancient mysteries of Samatharis, and whence came they and their gods Kabiri? See Mackey's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Clement speaks of the mysteries of the Kabiri as the sacred mysteries of the brother slain by his brethren, and the Kabiric death was one of the secret symbols of antiquity. Thus, the allegory of the self murdered by the not self is perpetuated through the religious mysticism of all peoples. The philosophic death and the philosophic resurrection are the lesser and the greater mysteries, respectively.
Okay, this is a good paragraph. Any thoughts about this off the top? Okay, first up, the figure of a man standing upright facing the figure of a woman standing on her head. The second volume of The Secret Doctrine reveals the hidden meaning behind this living symbolism. And by the way, the illustration that she describes and refers to, I was able to find actually in online in the Histoire de la Magie. So this is the actual illustration she's talking about. So could we get a reader, please?
Lynn, can you read that, please?
Is the Western Kabbalist generally an opponent of the Eastern occultist require a proof? Let him open Eliphas Levi's Histoire de la Magie and carefully examine his grand symbol Kabbalistic of the Zohar. He will find on the engraving given a white man standing erect and a black woman upside down, such as standing on her head, her legs passing under the extended arms of the male figure and protruding behind his shoulders, while their hands join at an angle on each side. Eliphas Levi makes of it God and nature, or God, light, mirrored inversely in nature and matter, darkness. Kabbalistically and symbolically, he is right, but only so far as emblematical cosmogony goes, nor has he invented the symbol any more than the Kabbalists have. The two figures in white and black stone have existed in the temples of Egypt from time immemorial, ever since the day of King Cambyses, who personally saw them. These figures were the two Kabiri, personifying the opposite poles. Herodotus tells posterity that when Cambyses entered the temple of the Kiberian, he went into an inextinguishable fit of laughter on perceiving a man erect and a woman standing on the top of her head before him. These were the poles, however, whose symbol was intended to commemorate the passing of the original North Pole of the earth to the South Pole of the heaven, but they represented also the poles inverted in consequence of the great inclination of the axis, bringing each time, as a result of the displacement of the oceans, the submersion of the polar lands, and the consequent upheaval of new continents in the equatorial regions and vice versa. These Kiberian were the deluge gods.
Okay, any thoughts about this? Interesting stuff, I think. So what happens when the poles reverse like this? what's the esoteric significance? You know, I mean, we know scientifically that this goes on. There's an inversion, but what happens esoterically? What does this represent? Any thoughts about that? Well,
Perhaps it's the changing power of the matriarchal to the patriarchal and vice versa. They always are shifting back and forth because at some point after a cycle continues that we're going to shift back to a matriarchal society, and that the patriarchy will start to dissipate, and then they just keep on shifting and changing.
well, you're right about the idea of shifting cycles. Now, I think what we're talking about here is the pralayas between root races. And so, you know, and the key here is that the upheaval of new continents in the equatorial regions and the submersion of the polar lands suggests that the end of a root race and the environment for the beginning of a new root race, right? And that they would have a quality of polar opposition, a yin-yang quality. So in that sense, you know, you're right in terms of the matriarch, patriarch, but it's not necessarily specifically, you know, a shift from one to the other. Yeah, so you can see that this is a deep teaching, you know, represented by a rather shocking image, right? I mean, you wouldn't even want to go into the racial connotations here because that's not what it's intended at all, okay? Okay, so here's an illustration of the canvases whose visit to Samatharis dates the Kiberian Mysteries to at least 500 BC, but it is likely that they are far older than that. Okay, next up. I ask, says, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a couple of comments. Lynn, it looked like yours got cut off. So can you try that again, please? Joan says, I think some scientists are saying that a change of poles may come soon.
Yeah, there's you know, there's been a rapid shifting of where magnetic north is. You know, it was in what's that big lake in Canada? You know, that huge body of water in Canada, which is has been the magnetic north, and it's shifting much more rapidly than it was when they first started recording those things. So that, you know, that's maybe indicative of that. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have a number of comments. Okay, so Lynn says Lilith was called, I think what she means is the black moon, and Greg said is considered the dark goddess. So yeah, she's called all of those things.
Right, and you know, esoterically, that could represent this inversion. I mean, you can see from one point of view is spirit and matter. You know, the metaphor for the material realm, the great mother, the divine mother is feminine, right? And the same thing for the masculine as being spirit. This has nothing to do with actual gender. You know, this is just the metaphor that has been adopted. And why? Because the female gives birth, and therefore they're representative of the natural world or the realm of manifestation, right?
And Greg says that the dark goddess feels to me more like the firmament.
Oh yeah, that's really an interesting observation. Yeah, you know, ultimately the mother principle is all space, right? It's the you could say the environment but in which manifestation is able to take place. So it's it predates substance itself. And from that, the firstborn of the Great Mother, which is self-generated, is the third logos, which is male, and is its sevenfold aspect which represent the seven rays, are all the forms of generation, right? He's also called the Prajapati. So you could see it, you could see this as the third logos, which is representative of the fire of the creative divinity, in consort with the Divine Mother, which then creates all the entire form world. But HPP gives us some very specific understanding here, which has to do with this reversal of the poles, right?
And Veronica says it also shows how the spirit gives life to nature by giving the seed of spirit to nature.
There you go. Yeah. You see how valuable these images can be, because it allows for all these truths to be born from these symbolic images, right? That's their power. And that doesn't mean that we've, considered everything that this could mean, but we've, it's really enriched our understanding just to have this image.
And then Yvonne, I see your hand. Hold on just one second. Carrie says, do you know what the symbols above their heads and their hands are? He says it looks like Hebrew letters.
Yeah.
Jan says that.
Right. This is, what is it called? Yod. This is the Yod, Y-O-D, which represents spirit, right? I would guess that this is He, H-E-H, which represents the material realm, but I'm a little bit on shaky ground with that one. I think that's right, though. See, it's definitely Hebrew letters. Good call, Carrie. These on noticing that.
And between their hands.
And between their hands, yeah, I don't know what those, yeah, and it looks to me like the same symbol.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we've got a bunch of questions. Jeremy wants to speak, but Yvonne's had her hand up for a little bit, and Anne wants to know what the circles represent. So let's go first to Yvonne. Go ahead.
Okay, well, you already answered the question. I wanted to know what was between their hands, but also on his body, it almost looks like he has chakras there, like a solar plexus, a heart chakra, the thing over his eyes. I'm not sure about the foot thing, but it looks like and then a sacral chakra down there. I can see like what I would call like 4 chakras on his body.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. That could be, but you have to consider where this comes from, the history of magic, and so it's going to have that orientation. In other words, particularly magical potencies, right?
And I guess the feet thing would be the base chakra on his toes. So,
well, the base chakra would be actually here, probably, and it would be.
I know, but they didn't have it.
Yeah. We can guess. I didn't go there because it was outside, what she describes here. But it's certainly available in the English translation, which is available, of the history of magic. And you could go to this section here, page 50, right? And read about this image there, right? But
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you answered Anne Veronica's questions, and then Jeremy had something to say. So were you finished with?
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is, I would like to know what these Hebrew symbols are, the connecting, because they're going to be bridging symbols that bridge the two worlds. Also, these little guys, are also Hebrew symbols of some type, and that represent this whole bridging process, but I can't sorry, guys, I didn't take this to the next level in terms of interpretation or prepare to do that for you. Yeah, so who?
Okay, Jeremy, go ahead. Well, I've asked you to unmute, but I don't see.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
Oh, thank you. I just thought it would say it would take a long time to put all this in a text. This great Kabbalistic symbol of the Zohar, so fascinating. And I can see that both perspectives, it seems to me, could be true in terms of the cyclic expression of matriarchy and then a patriarchy, and the view that it's a pralaya before entering into a new root race or sub-root race, and the scientists also say that when this pole shift occurs, there's going to be a lot of physical destruction, and that does seem like a good. I mean, it would seem logical that that type of destruction would lead into a retraction of sorts of civilization, and it could be, that as the sixth root race begins to manifest, that there could be a more of a feminine dominance than there is today.
Yeah,
And
if you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I just think there's a lot of, this is such a rich symbol. There's so many interpretations that we could make. So anyway, that's all I wanted to share.
Well, that's great. Yeah, the thing about symbols that you don't get in linear language is that many things can be simultaneously true.
Yes.
Right? And that's one of the great aspects of that. And certainly in this symbol, that would be true. Primarily it's a form of the yin yang symbol, right? You have that. And this connection at the root chakra and sacral levels, which is somewhat indicated, would be like the two dots in the yin yang symbol. The white dot, black part, in the black dot and the white part, because it shows the nature of their interconnection, right? It's also that point of axis where the shift takes place, right? So you can bring any yin yang cyclic activity to bear through this symbol, including the shift from matriarchy to patriarchy, the shift from even between, for instance, the rulership, the astrological rulership of a civilization, like the Taurian rulership of the Egyptian into the Piscean age. That could be, this could represent that, right? So there's many places you could go. Now the question is, what did the illustrator intend? Now, HPP tells us here that this is not an original symbol, that you can find the black and white stones in Egyptian temples, etc. So he particularized this universal symbol to describe some specific shift and interrelation here, right? And that would then take into account things like this, what this 13 means, 12, etc. We just, like I said, I didn't take it to the level of studying it to that degree. Anyone else?
Yes, we have a couple of more comments. And Veronica says, with this image, the belly button of the earth has a new meaning. It is the place where spirit and matter touch. Also, the feet of spirit comes down to earth, and the feet of nature touches the highest plane of the spirit.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, the omphalos is the point of contact, and it's that point of cyclic reversal, right? You know, in other words, you enter into either realm and the other realm becomes the other, you know, and that's the nature of this reversal. So it's the passage, this, you know, this area is the passage. And like you say, it's I think in Delphi represented by the omphalos, you know. I mean, it's really fascinating because what are all those bees doing there? Well, it kind of looks like a beehive, but esoterically, you have the connection, this connection between Venus and Earth, you know, our sister planet, esoterically, right? Where our souls have their origin. So, you know, it's really fascinating. It's the kind of thing you could stick this on your, you know, get a card made of this and have it around, and ideas would continue to come to you. Anyone else? No? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh, sorry. I was talking to you all, reading comments with my mute on. Okay, Greg says someone was asking about the symbols between the hands. To me, they feel like the serpents representing prana that joins the male and female, like an energetic connecting of a sort.
Yeah, I like that. And at the same time, somebody needs to actually pull up a Hebrew alphabet and
well, that was the next one. Carrie says he just checked. They are all Hebrew letters. So Carrie, what Hebrew letters are they?
I don't know. I just checked a Hebrew alphabet, but I don't know which letters they are.
Okay, well, you know, this is going to take a little more investigation, isn't it? And, you know, for those of you who have access to Paul Foster Case's tarot, he does this terrific, in the beginning of each of the arcanum, you know, the arcanum are associated with specific Hebrew letters. You could say that's one of the root sources of the energy of each arcanum of the major tarot, right? And he talks about, he basically defines this esoteric meaning. And so that's a very fruitful source. Once we figure out these, you know, I'm sorry, guys,
Okay.
I wish I had taken the time. I didn't know we would go this way.
All right, Michelle has given us a little bit of help. She says the Hebrew letters, and I'm going to say these wrong. Michelle, maybe you need to say this. Hey at the bottom, the emperor, son of the morning, window, Aries. Yod at the top, the hermit, prophet of the eternal, Virgo. Beth between the hands, Magus, house, Mercury. Is that anywhere close at all, Michelle?
Yeah, I think so.
That sounds good to me. Well, okay. Yeah, all right. I guess that this is He, you know, which is the feminine principle. Beth is the house of bread. Bethlehem, right? That's where Christ came from. So that's going to represent the place where the form manifests from spirit, out of Bethlehem, right? So Beth would be the, you know, the connecting, energetic between the two, which is what I thought, but it's good to know that it's Beth, and much more can be read. Like, I would really like to know the tarot card associated with Beth. But like I said, we just don't have the information right.
Well, she says Mercury and the Magus, so the magician, is that?
All right, guys. If that interested, hang on.
He's going to get his Paul casebook.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, so He is the emperor. H-E-H. That's the emperor.
Right, that's what Michelle told us.
Okay.
And the Yod is the hermit.
Right.
And Beth is the Magus. So is that?
Okay, hang on.
You have that t-shirt.
Beth means house, and it is the Hebrew letter of the magician, which tells us a lot right there, right? Because if you think of, okay, guys, hang on. All right, we're going to go over to internet land very quickly. I'm going to pull up, let's see. Okay, everybody see that? You can see the wand, which is up pointing flame, and it's down pointing flame, and the hand that holds it, and the hand that points down, which is just the outer symbol of this wand. It's really the wand that tells the whole story, as the same idea as is described in this image, right? And so it's natural that it would be the energy that would connect the two aspects, right? So you could say, in a sense, that this is the upward pointing flame, this is the downward pointing flame, and the wand or Beth would be the connective tissue. That's, that's as far as we can take it now. There's, he writes about it. We'll see if there's anything particularly. I'll go back over here. Can you see that all right? BL.
Well, we can see a whole bunch of, oh, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
so here to the right is,
Right, the magician, and there's the symbol.
Hang on a sec. I'll just do this. There we go. All right. All right. It's good enough for now. So you can see just symbolically the relationship between these two figures, right? Focus specifically on the wand and the fact that the two hands are the same as the wand. Also, the sum total is in the Ouroboros, right? Which is in other words, that this cycle is represented, right? The above and the below is part of the cycle of the Ouroboros. Okay, so that's the imagery of this. And so Paul Foster Kay says, time was when the whole art of building was called a mystery and was under the direction of the priests of Thoth, Nebo, Hermes, Mercury. House building is part of the Hermetic science, and survivals of this idea are preserved in the rituals of Freemasonry. Mercury is the astrological attribution to Beth. It represents both the planet and the god. Understand by God an aspect of universal consciousness personified. Yeah. So Mercury, of course, has a dualistic quality. The twofold, the higher and lower aspects, represented here again by the magician. Now, I did a whole presentation and an astrological webinar on the idea that this card actually represents Vulcan, but we won't go there because of the assignation of number one, etc. But you can see the connection and how Beth as Mercury is represented here. So this would be the hermit, who is the you could say he who brings forth the ancient wisdom, and the emperor, which is he who personifies that potency in manifestation. Okay. Well, wow. If I had no idea we were going to get into that, but that was fun. Anybody else before we go on?
Yes, Yvonne has had her hand up for a long time. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Okay, you had mentioned bees And bees are not native to the planet Earth. They were a gift from Venus. Probably about the same time they brought the gift of mind, but I don't know where the bees are. She said somewhere around the head. So I know they're a gift that's in the
Well, you know, if you think of the omphalos, at Delphi that's covered with bees, exoterically it's a beehive. Esoterically, it suggests, that wormhole between the two planets, or this kind of a place, the Beth connection, the mercurial connection between the two planets, Venus to Earth and vice versa, if you rotate cyclically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else? Cool beans, guys. This is what I love the most, is these conversations. That's what really brings it all home. All right. So here's Cambyses doing his thing. He was a conqueror type god. He was the one that laughed uproariously when he saw these two people. All right, next up, let me get back in. Next up, I ask, says Voltaire. Did I already do this? Freemasons. Yeah, I think I did.
I don't remember now because we've been on the other one for a long time.
No, you didn't do it yet.
Oh, I didn't. Okay, thank you. So I ask, says Voltaire, who were these hierophants, these sacred Freemasons, who celebrated their ancient mysteries of Samothracia, and whence came they and their gods Kabiri? The assumption that the priests of the Kiberian mysteries were Freemasons in the modern sense of the word is speculative, to say the least, and can only be based on the allegorical murder of one brother by the other three. Since there are absolutely no other historical writings that relate the Kiberian mysteries to Freemasonry, if the murder of Cadmelus, remember this illustration from last time? If the murder of Cadmelus by his three brothers accurately describes the mysteries as practiced on Samatharis and Lemnos, this symbolic act may have formed the basis of the third degree in Masonry, but we have no writings that directly connect this. Okay, next, Clement speaks of the mysteries of the Kabiri as the sacred mystery of a brother slain by his brethren, and the Kabiri death was one of the secret symbols of antiquity. MPH follows this statement with what he feels to be the meaning of the allegory. Thus, the allegory of the self, capital S, murdered by the not self, is perpetuated through the religious mysticism of all peoples. Okay, the capital S self, the soul, is quote unquote murdered by the not self through incarnation and subsequent personality identification. That's actually where the murder really takes place, is personality identification. This is the quote philosophic death that he refers to here. The philosophic resurrection is gradually realized on the evolutionary path, a process that was accelerated in ancient times by the lesser and greater mysteries, still carried on today in all the extant mystery schools, including Theosophy. And that completes MPH's survey of the Kiberian mysteries, which is one of my favorites. Any final thoughts or questions?
Yes, Anne Veronica says the image that she sent, it looked like a connection with the ley lines, not a beehive. She says, I guess it goes both ways.
Yeah, I'd have to see the image to comment, sorry.
Yeah, it should be there in your chats. I don't know if you can download it from there.
Yeah, I can. If you want to take the time to do that, I can do that. Here we go.
Well, if this is a good spot to stop, we've really only got about 15 minutes left, so.
Well, I can pull it up if you're interested. I'm happy to do that. Like I said, the interaction is to me the thing. All right, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? She sent it a bit ago, didn't she?
Well, I sent it. Well, yeah, she did. And then I'm the one, she sent it directly to me. So it would be from me.
Okay, I got it. So here we go. All right. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, this is a wonderful thing. Let me copy this and put it in our thing. Okay, so going back one. Oh, I gotta come out of this program to do this.
Yeah, and I think you put it at the last. Oh no, there it is. It's slide 54 is where you put.
I got it.
Okay.
All right, here it is, guys. Isn't this wonderful? You could see it's, you're right, it's not, I must have been thinking, do you see any beeves on there?
No.
No, I must have been thinking of another omphalos that had the bees. This is just this myriad of interlinking chains, that suggest all the cycles. Notice how they're linked and they go around this omphalos. There's the top of it. Like I said, I was actually in this museum. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. Let me take that out. Yeah, this is.
No, those were the ley lines that it represented.
Okay. Oh, I see. Sure. Okay. Well, we're not going to go here, but you can see that this is a deep subject for exploration. But this omphalos represents, that place that connects the two realms of the seen and unseen worlds. I don't know why I thought they were bees. Who knows? All right, so we're done with this section. We still have a little time though, so we're going to go forward. Yeah, and that completes the MPH survey of the Kiberian Mysteries. So for the last segment of the myth of the dying god, we go all the way back to the Norse mystery school, whose solar deity was Udan. Let's see, is that here? Yeah, here we go. So could we get a reader for this?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Hang on.
Okay.
We go back in full screen mode. There you go.
A curious aspect of the dying god myth is that of the hanged man. The most important example of this peculiar conception is found in the Odinic rituals, where Odin hangs himself for 9 days from the branches of the world tree, and upon the same occasion also pierces his own side with the sacred spear. As the result of this great sacrifice, Odin, while suspended over the depths of the Niflheim, discovered by meditation the runes or alphabets by which later the records of his people were preserved. Because of this remarkable experience, Odin is sometimes shown seated on a gallows tree, and he became the patron deity of all who died by the noose. Esoterically, the hanged man is the human spirit, which is suspended from heaven by a single thread. Wisdom, not death, is the reward for this voluntary sacrifice, during which the human soul, suspended above the world of illusion and meditating upon its unreality, is rewarded by the achievement of self-realization.
Now, this is a great summation here. So I want to explore this a little more deeply. Here's a poem from the Poetic Edda, a collection of Norse myths compiled in the 13th century by Snorri Sturluson, called Udun's Rune Song. Carrie, would you read this? I just like your poetic rendition.
Okay. Shall I sing it?
Yeah, would you please?
No, I kidding.
But it needs to be in the original.
Yeah.
Genic, you know.
I know that I hung on a wind-rocked tree 9 whole nights with a spear wounded, and to Odin offered myself to myself on that tree, of which no one knows from what root it springs. Bread no one gave me, nor a horn of drink. Downward I peered, to runes applied myself, wailing learned them, then fell down thence. 9 mighty lays I learned from the famous son of Bolthorn, Bestla's father, and a draught I had of the holy mead poured out of Odrarir. Then I began to bear fruit, and to know many things, to grow and well thrive. Word by word I sought out words, fact by fact I sought out facts.
Okay, so first we have a clue as to the identity of the wind-rocked tree, with the words at the end of the verse, no one knows from what root it springs, suggesting that it is the world tree. Remember studying this? I think it's been over a year now. Yggdrasil was the name of this Norse tree on which Udun hangs, on which we all hang. It's through incarnation. In this, we have a precursor to the crucifixion, which became a kind of world tree when Jesus mounted that cross. They're not identical events. Baldur was the Christ of the Norse, not Udun, but both were initiatory events, and both resulted in teachings going out into the world by means of scripture on one hand and runes on the other. You can also compare him to Moses, who went to the mountaintop, which is another form of the world tree, and received the word of God on his tablets, like the runes, brought them back. This is also the tree of the hanged man, the 12th arcanum of the Tarot. In his book on the Tarot, Paul Foster Case says simply, every human personality is completely dependent upon the all, here symbolized by the tree, a cross of living wood symbolizing the cosmic life. So next, with a spear wounded, which MPH tells us is self-inflicted. This piercing was also an aspect of the crucifixion, both representing a letting of the heart's blood for all humanity. Next, we come to the heart of the poem with the line, and to Udun offered myself to myself. When I read this line, I immediately thought of the old commentary at the end of Initiation, Human and Solar. Could we get a reader for that, please?
Okay, Martha, can you read that for us, please?
I play my part with stern resolve, with earnest aspiration. I look above, I help below. I dream not, nor I rest. I toil, I serve, I reap, I pray. I am the cross, I am the way. I tread upon the work I do. I mount upon my slain self. I kill desire, and I strive for getting all reward. I forego peace, I forfeit rest, and in the stress of pain, I lose myself and find myself and enter into peace.
Thank you, Martha. So the words, I lose myself and find myself, are another aspect of the idea of offering myself to myself, right? The former suggests re-identification with the soul, the latter an offering of the personality as a vehicle for use by the soul. But in this phrase, there's a third instance of self, quote, and to Udan offered myself to myself. To me, this suggests an offering to a yet higher power, to Udan as deity beyond that being which is hanging in the tree, a kind of combination of I and my Father are one, myself to myself, and not my will, but thine be done. That further pitching, right? It could be a monadic reference. Any thoughts or questions about that? Next, bread no one gave me, nor a horn of drink, suggests prerequisites often present for vision quests in any discipline, shamanic or otherwise. Next, downward I peered, to runes applied myself, wailing learnt them, then fell down thence. Udan clairvoyantly perceives the runes, which through great effort and by an act of applied intuition, he gradually masters before being released from his experience. Next, 9 mighty lays I learned from the famous son of Bolthorn, Bestla's father. A lay is a narrative poem or song. Bolthorn was a Jotun, a seer like Mimir. Remember Mimir in Mimir's well, where Odin went to get a drink that would bestow wisdom? He was, Bolthorn was the father of Bestla, and therefore grandfather of the gods Udan, Vili, and Ve, the Norse Trinity. Thus, the quote, 9 mighty lays came from the same high source as Udan's vision of the runes. Next, and a draught I had of the holy mead poured out of Odrerir. Odrerir was the name of a vessel that contained the mead of poetry. You can see the metaphor, right? Could we get a reader for this quote from Joseph Campbell?
I'm sure, Greg, I'm going to ask you to read that, but first let me say he's got a couple comments here. He said this is similar to the term walkabout from the Australian Aboriginal teaching or the Native American teaching.
Absolutely, right, yeah. Hanging in the tree is done in so many different ways around, in different cultures. And yes, those two instances would definitely be like hanging from the world tree. In fact, metaphorically, they are. The walkabout is to hang from the world tree, right? The quests of the Native Americans is the same form.
Okay, can you read that, please, Greg?
Yeah. And of the mead of poesy, Odin is the possessor and dispenser, for it was in the arts of war, the arts of skaldic verse, and the wisdom of the runes that the power and glory of the Viking fleets consisted. Poetry itself was Odin's ale, and in poetry of his sort resided the power of life.
Okay, so this is, this is Joseph Campbell. He's a straightforward archaeologist, right? But this is his insight into what Udan represented in Norse mythology, right? The mead of poesy. All right, finally, in the last verse, the gift of wisdom takes root in Udan's waking consciousness. He's been able to interpret the intuition, the metaphor, and actually bring it into a teaching that can be received outwardly, right? Word by word, fact by fact. So any thoughts or questions on anything from Udun's rune song?
Efrosini says it reminds me of the enlightenment of the Buddha under the Bodhi tree.
Yeah, that's another world tree. That definitely is another world tree, right? It's the place between, right? As we're about to find out, to finish, yeah, we have time. To finish up this section on the Hanged Man, let's take a look at an excerpt from Paul Foster Case's commentary on the 12th arcanum of the Tarot. Can we get a reader, please?
Shara, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. Hanged Man. The title means occultly suspended mind, because man and mind are from the same Sanskrit root, and this fact was known to the occultists who invented the tarot. The title refers also to the utter dependence of human personality upon cosmic life. It is evident that the legs of the hanged man form a cross, and that lines drawn from his elbows to the point formed by his hair will form the sides of a reverse triangle, having his arms for its base. The cross is the number 4, and the triangle the number 3. The multiplication of these two numbers results in 12, which, because it is the number of signs in the zodiac, represents a complete cycle of manifestation. The same idea is represented by the garments of the hangman. His legs are red, the color of fire, and his jacket, blue, the color of water. These elements are as opposite as light and darkness, and as contrary as black and white. Thus, opposition is plainly symbolized by the clothes as well as by the position of the figure. Every human personality is completely dependent upon the all, here symbolized by the tree. As soon as this truth is realized, course of conduct is a complete self-surrender. The surrender.
Oops, hang on.
Sure.
The line, starting with the only logical and sensible.
Oh, sorry. As soon as this truth is realized, the only logical and sensible course of conduct is a complete self-surrender. This surrender begins in the mind. It is the submission of the personal consciousness to the direction of the universal mind. The mental attitude suggested by the hanged man is then not my will, but thine, ever the position of the adept. It is an attitude born of knowledge that my will is elusive and personal, a reflection or mask of thy will, which is the purpose or motive of cosmic life.
Thank you, Shara. So any thoughts about this? Any questions? I love this. I think he's nailed it.
Well, it reminds me of that Kiberian thing, that picture where we're looking at, of kind of the upside down.
Right. Yeah, it's very much like that, isn't it? I mean, it has that element to it, you know.
Well, because around the head is, on this hanged man, is the sun, and the emperor was the sun, and Aries, and which is representative of the head. It's just kind of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, good catch. Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, you have this Tao, which represents the universal tree or the world tree, is upright. And then the human, the self-aware, capital S, aware human, is the one in the reverse position. This is a recognition of the true state of things, right? The unaware human would be upright because they would think that that's the orientation of, you know, life in the world, before it's recognized that, what does he say here, that you are, every human personality is completely dependent upon the all. And once that's recognized, then this symbol represents the consciousness of the human. Any thoughts about this? Questions?
Yes, we've got a couple. And Veronica says, again, we have the moon, like on the face of the image we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And then Greg says, I keep on thinking about the term hang man. For me, I relate it to more in the syntax of making hang 2 syllables instead of 1, at least in the case of the tarot.
Okay. And what inference does that bring up? What do you draw from it, saying it that way or seeing it that way?
Greg?
Spoken word. The power of the spoken word.
Okay, so you just feel that this, when describing this symbol, that's a more appropriate way to say it, huh?
And that's just me. I mean, I worked with the tarot for so long that I've always associated certain variations on that, because if you split it and turn it into 1 syllable, then it becomes the one by itself. But when you have 2, then there's 2 aspects of hanged or
Gotcha.
hanged one.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. Yeah. Notice too that the number 12, Case talks about the 12 here, right? Is the 3 and the 4, and you multiply them. But another is just even more simply, you have the 1 of unity and spirit represented by the 3. And you have the 2, which is in, all Greek mythology was the number of the manifest world. And so you have their interrelation in the 12, so which is represented by this symbol. So that's, a little bit of numerology there.
You also get Greg's idea, the 2 syllables and the 1.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this, I get in hanged, you have these 2 aspects, right? Yeah. And you can go way further. There's 6 buttons and there's 4. The 4 is, the lords of karma, the primordial 4, which are the Lapika lords, which determine all existence. And then the cross of matter indicated by this, right? And then you have the 6 of manifestation, which are the 6 subplanes, right? Together making up the 10, as in the 10 Sephiroth in the tree of life, so yeah, there's a lot here, but you get the fundamental idea.
And then Anne Veronica says, or asks, what is the word on the right? It looks like the tree and the earth make this symbol. I think she means down or on the bottom, the Hebrew.
What's the Hebrew letter here described? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I think so. And she says, oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, it is Mem, M-E-M, whose value is 40. Do I go into this here? I thought I went into this. I might actually go into this here. No, I don't. I think it must have been the other. Some webinar somewhere, I take this further. But yeah, it represents, the value is 40, which is also indicative. Second of 3 mother letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Its name literally means seas, S-E-A-S. But it represents the esoteric idea of water, which is the mother, right? So it's one of the mother letters, and it represents the mother aspect.
And she asks why 2 moons, and to me that seems to fit in with that too.
What do you think? Why 2 moons?
One is waxing, one is waning.
Yeah, right. That's what I see too. So it represents the cycles of being, right? You've entered in right here, at this dividing line, you've entered into time and space, whose sum total is the number 10. That's the all, right? And the two moons represent that cyclic manifestation, Mim, the waters of life, you know. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. It's good to explore this. Anyone else on this symbol? All right.
Oops, sorry. No. I was talking. I haven't got the mute thing down all that well today. Mem says 12, Neptune, creative realization, represents a path on the tree of life that connects Hod, Mercury, and Gebura, Mars.
Okay. All right, I'm trying to see why the Gebura reference is there. You want to elucidate? You want to explain, describe what you're talking about a little bit more?
Well, I'll try. You know, the paths of the tree represent, or you know, integrating the principles of the Zephyr. I'm afraid I probably I have some knowledge of Kabbalah, but you know, not enough to probably elucidate enough.
Okay, that's okay. You know, just that is good. Yeah, you know, there's you could definitely, the tree of life, you know, which is the 10 Sephiroth, which have the 3 in the upper part and the 7 below, certainly has its references here, and you could explore that, even though this one is divided into the 6 and the 4, which is a little different, right? But also that 6 and 4 represent the manifested world, not the sum total. So yeah. Again, I love your guys' interest. We could take this further, with definitely, but that's going to have to do it because we are out of time. This is the last paragraph, but we're going to have to end this entire chapter, entire section, before we can move on to a new subject altogether. But it's, you know, there's a little bit there, so we're going to have to wait until next time. So let's turn to dates.
Okay, next time will be the 3rd of April, and it will be at 7 p.m. GMT because we spring forward here in the US. And I think at that point, Europe has sprung forward as well. So we're adjusting our time.
The daylight savings time will have started. Now, what we do is that, like, the actual hour doesn't change. What we've done is change the we've changed the time that it starts in GMT so that our actual time doesn't change. So that was confusing. So we're going to be meeting, is it right, 4 o'clock your time, BL? Is that right?
Yes.
2 o'clock local time, my time, for the few of you who live in my time zone. But at any rate, just go, you know, to GMT 7 p.m. and figure out what your local time is for that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. And then before that, we have the 20 March Secret Doctrine, which will also be at 7 p.m. because we have changed times at that point too. So we hope to see you all there.
Has Europe changed by that time?
By the 20th, I think they might have. I don't know. I haven't looked this year.
Okay, again, just check out your 7 p.m. GMT to find out.
Yeah. Carrie, do you know when Europe changes?
You might have already.
Sorry, no, I don't.
Yeah. Okay, that's it, guys. Thanks so much for attending, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the Secret Doctrine series. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Francis.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.